Hello, I'm Ryan Knowles. Today I'm going to give a demonstration on how to brew beer. I'm going to teach you everything you need to know to brew your first batch of beer. Before we get started, just want to say I'm 25 years old. I am over 21. It's legal. Everyone always asks me if brewing beer is legal. It has been legal since 1979 when Jimmy Carter made it legal. So first, I'll go over the ingredients. Beer has 3 major ingredients in addition to water. The first one, which gives the beer its alcohol and a lot of its flavor, is barley. Just grown. This is malted barley, which means that it's been germinated, and then the sugar or starches in it, and then goes through a process to convert the starches to sugar. Today, instead of using this, which is what you would use for all grain brewing, we're going to be using malt extract, which is better for beginner brewers. It's just they've already taken the sugars out of the grain, so we have it in this little thing. We will be using a small bit of barley to give the beer a typical flavor, to adjust for the style of the beer so that all beer isn't the same. The second ingredient is hops. Our hops, they come in these little packages in 1 ounces. We'll be using 3.5 ounces of hops today, added at 3 different times. And when you add the hops at different times, it affects the bitterness, the flavor, the aroma, all those things. We'll talk more about that later. The third ingredient, which is very important, is yeast. We're going to use dry yeast today. This is very, very cheap. The cheapest ingredient, this costs about $1. You can also get liquid yeast, which is usually more for a different style of beer, more specific. It's more expensive. It costs $5 or $6 usually. But dry yeast, some people think is better. Some people think liquid yeast is better, but it doesn't matter. You can get the malt extract in a liquid form, or you can get it in a dry powdered form like this. And either one you can use. It doesn't really make any difference if you're going to do that. What we're doing right now is I'm boiling or heating up 3 gallons of water. When you're brewing extract beer, your boil volume doesn't matter. You can have 3 gallons, 2 gallons, 1 gallon, but you want to try to boil or heat up as much water as the biggest pot you have. I have a 5.5 gallon pot. We're just doing 3 gallons today. When it gets to about 155 degrees, we will add the specialty grains inside of a mesh pouch like this. If you don't have a thermometer, and the cheap turkey thermometers don't work very well because they're not very accurate, don't really worry about it. Just make sure you do not boil these grains because it will give some harsh flavors to your beer. After we we'll let that sit at around 150, in between 150 and 170 degrees for about 25 minutes. After that, we'll add 1 of these, which is 3.15 pounds of malt extract. We'll add 1 of these, and we'll let that go until it boils. After it starts boiling, we'll add our first addition of hops. Later, when there's about 15 minutes left, we'll add the second jug of malt extract. Adding the malt at different stages will affect how the color of your beer. It'll make it lighter if you spread them out. It'll also make the beer much lighter in body, and it'll bring the flavor of the hops out. After we get done with that, we'll cool it. You can cool it several ways. You can put it in a big ice bath and let it sit, and that'll take about an hour or so. Or the best way, you can use this. This is a copper wort chiller. And what that does is it hooks up to the garden hose, and then one end goes in, runs through, and comes out, and it cools the beer. And this will cool a 3-gallon batch in about 15 minutes. You want to cool it under 100 degrees before you add your yeast, because then if it's more, it'll kill the yeast, which isn't good. Then after we cool it, we will add our yeast. Then we'll put them in a bucket like this. And this is, when it's in here, it will undergo what's called primary fermentation. That's when the yeast are eating the sugar from the barley, and they're converting it to alcohol and CO2. It's very important, when you figure out what you're doing, you can use a glass jug, but at first it's a little risky because if it builds up too much pressure, it can shatter the glass jug, which is why the plastic things are good, because it can just pop the top off and it won't really matter. There's a little hole on top of this, which we will put an airlock into, and it just helps keep the air from getting in, because you don't want bacteria, all those things getting in, affecting your beer. After you get done with that, usually it'll stay in primary fermentation for about a week in this jug. If it can take longer. And after that, most of the sugars have been eaten by the yeast, and you have beer. This is called a siphon pump, and you just put it in it, and you do that, and it siphons the beer out. Then you could siphon it into this glass jar, or a glass jar like this, and this is where what is called secondary fermentation, and it'll stay in there usually for about 2 weeks. And during that time, the beer will clear, all the yeast will settle out of it, everything else that you don't want will settle out of it, and then you can put it in a bucket and bottle it, or bottle it right out of here, and then it'll be in the bottle. When you bottle it, to get carbonation, you have to add priming sugar, which is corn sugar. You want to add about 4.5 ounces of priming sugar per 5-gallon batches of beer, which is what we're making, 5 gallons of beer. And you'll boil that in water and just add it to it right before you bottle. And then after you cap it, the yeast will eat the sugar and give off CO2, and that's what causes carbonation. Usually after you bottle it, it'll take 2 weeks to carbonate. But you should let your beer age 5 or 6 weeks till it's really good. A heavier beer with a higher alcohol percentage, like a 9% or 10% beer, you might need longer, 6 months to a year before it's properly aged and ready to drink. Bottling is really easy. That's another question I get a lot of. This is a beer bottle, and you just buy these little caps. I'll show you real quick how that works. You have a capper like this. And then you just put the cap on top, and this is after you fill the beer up, and you put it down, and then it's ready to go. That's all there is to it. And then, like I said, it'll take a couple weeks for it to be carbonated, and then a couple more weeks to age, and then you're good to go. Usually beer, after it's been brewed, will be good for several months afterwards. There's several different options you can use to bottle it. You have these 22-ounce bottles, which are nice because you don't have to cap so many on bottling day. They also have these 32-ounce, and they have the swig top on them, which is nice. And then what's really nice for barbecues and tailgating and all that, I have this 3-gallon, it's a soda keg, and then I have a little pressure thing on it, and then you can just dispense of it right out there like a keg. The friends are always impressed when you have these. Let's see. All right. One batch of beer makes about 5 gallons of extract beer. That will produce about 48 bottles around there, about 12-ounce bottles, or about half as many of the 22-ounce bottles, and it works out pretty well. You can buy your ingredients, your supplies, all of those things. The place I buy most of my stuff is www.midwestsupplies.com. northernbrewer.com has a lot of stuff too. Cool Stuff in Columbia, Missouri has a limited, but has some stuff too. There's a really good store I've never been to, but I've heard about it in Springfield, Missouri, that has everything. Let's see. Okay. So now I'll check the temperature of our water and see where we're at. I think we're too hot.